By April 4th, 1979, the crisis phase of the 3 Mile Island accident was effectively over. Metropolitan Edison, the owner of the plant, and GPU Nuclear, the subsidiary who actually ran the plant, breathed a sigh of relief as plant operators were actually able to bring the plant to a stable shutdown condition at this time. Over the next several months would ensue a period of plant stabilization. In the meantime, GPU had the daunting task of where to proceed with plant cleanup. Unfortunately, nobody in the industry had ever taken on such a complex and demanding task, as a nuclear accident of this magnitude had not occurred anywhere in the world at this point in history. In addition, there was few, if any, regulations that governed on how to proceed with such a cleanup. With that in mind, GPU made a few basic management decisions on where to proceed at this point. First off, they were facing bankruptcy. They decided they wanted to survive as a company. So making safety paramount, the overall goal of the task at hand was to place the plant in a condition such that there was no risk to the health and safety of the public. GPU also immediately realized that the cleanup task at hand was well beyond their expertise. They decided they needed industry experts. They brought in industry experts from other nuclear plants around the world. They brought in experts from the government, national laboratories, and universities around the nation as well. So no one at the plant had any clue as to the extent of the core damage or how to defuel such a mess. The schedules and plans they made quickly became obsolete, and no amount of engineering or planning was sufficient to begin to know how to clean up at this point. Surprisingly, for some time after the event, GPU officials actually envisioned bringing the plant back online. Despite life-threatening radiation levels and massive contamination in the auxiliary and containment buildings, many thought the plant damage was actually quite minimal, and some officials even believed that it was possible to bring the plant back online in a matter of a few weeks. Yet not long after recovery efforts began, GPU realized that the damage was far worse than they could have expected, and estimated it would be impossible to repair the reactor. It wasn't until June 1982 that GPU actually got the first look at the core. They inserted a small video camera through a nozzle in the reactor vessel head. They realized after about 5 feet of void that nearly 50% of the core had actually melted and made its way to the bottom of the reactor vessel. The following diagram actually shows the postulated conditions in the core as little as 4 hours into the event. An accident of this magnitude brought an extensive need for resources. As would be expected in a situation like this, a plethora of engineers, scientists, regulators, volunteers, industry experts, skilled labor, unskilled labor, all joined in the effort. About 3 weeks after the accident occurred, 1,964 people checked into the TMI Observation Center for work. GPU then led a volunteer effort to gather labor for the impending decontamination effort. And although no special incentives were offered, the response was outstanding. Hundreds of non-nuclear trained volunteers, ranging from clerks to linemen to janitors, worked in shifts, performing vital decontamination functions for over a year. Even an unprecedented agreement between GPU and the labor unions recognized the need and the importance for this decontamination effort, not only for the nuclear industry, but for the nation itself. Overall, an average of 1,000 people worked nearly 11 years on the project. This doesn't even include the labor that was necessary to evaporate the wastewater that was generated during the cleanup. So what would the core look like when GPU finally got a look? How would the regulatory environment change? How much manpower would be needed? Would there be any innovations in the robotic technology necessary to defuel the core? At what cost? These were just some of the questions that the financial executives were asking at the start of the cleanup. Originally, insurance only estimated about $140 million worth of damage had actually occurred. As the cleanup process progressed, financial experts then estimated somewhere between $430 million to well over $1 billion would be necessary to fund the cleanup. In the end, it did cost $973 million. So this funding came from various sources from the entities that had the most interest in an expeditious cleanup. Insurance and the GPU Corporation itself would fund most of the money necessary for the cleanup. The state of Pennsylvania and the state of New Jersey contributed some as well. And even the nuclear and electric industry itself, the U.S. Department of Energy, and even some foreign governments like Japan contributed funding for research and development. So shortly after the accident, the question that was on everybody's mind was, what would happen with nuclear power from this point forward in this country? Would it die a slow death, or would it recover and evolve into a predominant source of energy for a growing society? Well, the answer was somewhere in between the two. Ever since 1979 and before, the public has viewed nuclear power with ambivalence. They view it as a clean, reliable source of energy with dire consequences if the technology is mismanaged. Today, only 5 nuclear plants are under construction. 100 are still operational, and recently 4 have been shut down. Despite an industry in hiatus, vast improvements have been made in operational reliability and safety since 1979. At the plants around the nation, significant events have dropped off dramatically, about 96% since 1985. The following graphs show the trends and improvement in various areas of nuclear plant performance. Actuation of reactor safety systems has dropped by 90%. In 2007, only 50 unplanned reactor scrams occurred. By contrast, over 500 unplanned scrams occurred in 1985. Lastly, radiation dose received from plant workers has been reduced to 20% of the 1985 levels.